Matin Brooks had a way of making friends anywhere. At 34, his easygoing demeanor and infectious laugh made him the kind of person people gravitated toward. With dark brown eyes that always seemed to carry a spark of humor and thick, wavy hair that he kept just a bit longer than necessary, Matin's appearance mirrored his personality, approachable and genuine. But beneath the charm was a man shaped by loss and responsibility. Matin's father had passed away when he was just a baby, leaving his mother, Grace Brooks, to raise him alone. Grace had leaned heavily on her brother-in-law, Uncle Joe, a gruff but loving man who treated Matin as his own. Uncle Joe had been there for every milestone, from Little League games to high school graduations, filling the void left by Matin's father. Now in his late 70s, Uncle Joe's health had begun to decline, and Matin had made the decision to move in with him. Uncle Joe, a retired mechanic with silver hair and calloused hands, was both fiercely independent and stubbornly proud. But the once strong man was no longer able to manage on his own, and though he protested, Matin insisted on being there for him, just as Joe had been there for Matin. Moving in with Uncle Joe wasn't a decision Matin made lightly. The transition meant leaving behind his bachelor apartment downtown and the life of casual freedom he'd grown accustomed to. But for Matin, family always came first. It was something Grace had instilled in him, a mantra reinforced by Uncle Joe's unwavering presence throughout his life. The small brick house where Uncle Joe had lived for over 50 years still bore the marks of a life well lived. Faded photographs lined the walls, each telling a story of family gatherings, fishing trips, and milestones. The scent of motor oil lingered faintly, a reminder of Joe's years as a mechanic. The garage, though cluttered with tools and spare parts, was a sanctuary of memories, where Matin had spent countless afternoons learning how to fix things under Joe's patient guidance. But now the house felt different. Uncle Joe moved slower, his steps deliberate and labored. His hands, once steady and strong, trembled slightly as he gripped his cane. Despite his declining health, his wit remained sharp. "You're fussing over me like a mother hen," Joe grumbled one morning as Matin cooked breakfast. "Someone has to," Matin replied, flipping pancakes. "Can't have you living off canned soup and toast," Joe snorted, but a smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "You make it sound like I'm helpless." Matin set a plate in front of him, grinning. "You're not helpless, Uncle Joe, just a little rusty." Caring for Uncle Joe was both rewarding and challenging. Matin balanced his full-time job at a marketing agency with his responsibilities at home, often rushing back during lunch breaks to check on Joe. To ensure his uncle had constant care, Matin hired a daytime caregiver, Perez, a soft-spoken woman with a warm presence. Luna quickly adapted to Joe's gruff nature, earning his respect with her patience and gentle humor. "She's a good one," Joe remarked one afternoon as Luna left for the day. "Doesn't hover too much." Matin chuckled. "She's not supposed to hover. That's my job." Joe waved him off. "You've got better things to do than babysitting, old man." "I can multitask," Matin said with a grin. Despite Joe's protests, Matin could see how much his uncle appreciated the company. The two men spent evenings reminiscing over photo albums, watching old westerns, or tinkering with small projects in the garage. For the past year, Matin had been dating Addie Harper, a vivacious woman with a quick wit and an eye for fashion. Addie was strikingly beautiful, with sharp cheekbones, piercing green eyes, and a wardrobe that always turned heads. She loved the city's bustling nightlife, and often dragged Matin to events he wouldn't have attended on his own. But their relationship had grown strained. Addie didn't like Uncle Joe. She thought he had too much influence over Matin, and when Matin moved in to care for Joe, she saw it as a betrayal of their future together. "You should be moving in with me, not him," Addie had said during one of their many arguments. "Joe needs me," Matin replied, his voice calm but firm. "I can't just abandon him." "And what about us?" Addie demanded, her frustration bubbling over. "When is it our time?" The tension between Matin and Addie had been simmering for weeks, their once playful banter replaced by sharp words and heavy silences. Addie's resentment toward Uncle Joe was no secret. She often made pointed remarks about how Matin spent more time fixing Joe's dinner than planning their future. One evening, as Matin returned home after a long day at work and caring for Joe, he found Addie waiting for him in his driveway, arms crossed and jaw set. "We need to talk," she said curtly. Matin sighed, unlocking his front door and holding it open for her. "What now, Addie?" She stepped inside, her heels clicking against the tile floor. "When are you going to stop putting Joe's needs above ours?" she demanded, whirling to face him. Matin dropped his bag on the counter and turned to her, exhaustion etched into his features. "It's not about putting him above us, it's about doing what's right. He's family. And I'm supposed to be family too." Addie shot back, her voice rising. "Or did you forget that we've been talking about moving in together?" "No, I didn't forget," Matin replied, his tone calm but firm. "But Joe can't take care of himself right now. What am I supposed to do? Abandon him?" Addie threw up her hands. "You could have hired someone full-time. You didn't have to move in with him. That was a choice, Matin." The argument dragged on, each of them repeating the same points as if saying them louder might make the other understand. Matin tried to explain the depth of his bond with Uncle Joe, the man who had been more of a father to him than anyone else. Addie, however, saw it as an excuse. "You're using him to avoid committing to us," she accused. "That's not fair," Matin said, his voice tinged with frustration. "This isn't about avoiding commitment. It's about doing what's right for the person who's always been there for me." "And what about me?" Addie's voice cracked, tears brimming in her eyes. "Don't I matter?" Matin softened, stepping closer. "Of course, you matter, but if you can't see why this is important to me, maybe you don't understand who I am." Addie stared at him, her expression a mixture of hurt and disbelief. "So that's it? You're choosing him over me?" "I'm not choosing anyone over anyone," Matin replied, his voice steady. "But I won't turn my back on Joe." Their relationship deteriorated further in the weeks that followed. Addie became increasingly distant, her calls less frequent and her tone more clipped when they spoke. Matin tried to salvage what he could, but deep down he felt the foundation of their relationship crumbling. Then, one evening, as Addie left his house after another tense visit, Matin noticed a faint but unmistakable scent lingering in the air, men's aftershave. It was a brand Matin didn't use, and the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Unable to shake the suspicion, Matin did something he never thought he'd do. He hired a private investigator. Days later, the private investigator delivered his findings. Addie had been meeting a married man at the same hotel multiple times over the past 3 months. The betrayal was laid out in black and white photos and detailed reports, leaving no room for doubt. When Matin confronted Addie, she initially denied everything. "He's just a friend," she insisted, her voice defensive. "You're blowing this out of proportion." Matin pulled out the evidence the investigator had given him, spreading it across the coffee table. "This doesn't look like just a friend, Addie. How do you explain this?" Her face paled as she scanned the documents, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for the right words. Finally, she resorted to deflection. "You've been spying on me," she accused, her tone incredulous. "I trusted you," Matin said, his voice quiet but firm. "And I knew something was off. You lied to me, Addie, over and over again." "It wasn't serious," she said, tears streaming down her face. "It didn't mean anything." "It meant enough for you to betray me," Matin replied, his heart breaking even as he spoke. "And it doesn't matter if it was serious or not. You broke my trust." Addie reached out, her voice pleading. "Matin, please, we can fix this." But Matin shook his head, stepping back. "No, we can't. I can't build a future with someone who doesn't value honesty or loyalty. It's over, Addie." As Addie left for the last time, Matin felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The relationship that had once brought him joy had become a source of pain, and letting go felt like the only way to move forward. That evening, as he sat with Uncle Joe, he shared the truth about the breakup. Joe listened quietly, nodding as Matin finished his story. "You did the right thing, kid," Joe said gruffly. "It hurts now, but you'll be better off in the long run." Matin looked at his uncle, a man who had weathered his own share of heartbreak and hardship, and felt a sense of clarity. Addie had been a chapter in his life, but his priorities had always been clear: family, honesty, and doing what was right. And with that, Matin resolved to focus on the people who truly mattered, starting with himself and the man who had always stood by him. A few weeks later, Matin came home feeling unwell. What he thought was a bad cold turned out to be pneumonia. His uncle's caregiver, Luna Perez, immediately noticed the severity of his condition. Luna was a quiet, unassuming woman in her early 30s with soft brown eyes and a gentle demeanor. Her dark hair was always tied back, and she exuded a calmness that put everyone around her at ease. Luna didn't hesitate. She rushed Matin to the hospital and stayed by his side until Grace, his mother, arrived. During the day, Grace relished the opportunity to share stories about her son. "Did you know Matin once tried to build a treehouse when he was 10? Grace said, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "He didn't ask for help, insisted he could do it on his own. Ended up with more nails in his fingers than in the wood." Luna laughed, imagining a young Matin stubbornly trying to build something grand. "That sounds like him," she said. "He's so determined." Grace smiled knowingly. "He gets that from his father, but his heart, that's all Uncle Joe. He's the most loyal person I know. Once he cares about you, it's for life." The stories painted a vivid picture of Matin, filling in the gaps Luna hadn't known about him. She found herself falling not just for the man she knew now, but for the boy he had been and the values he had carried into adulthood. The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady beep of the heart monitor and the occasional hum of machines. During the night, Luna sits close and prayed over him and confessing her growing feelings, but Matin could hear her whispered prayers and heartfelt confessions, even in his weakened state. Matin lay still, his body weakened by pneumonia, but his mind alert enough to catch fragments of Luna's whispered words during the long night's ache. Her words gave him strength, and he began to see her in a new light. She wasn't just a caregiver. She was someone with a heart full of love and compassion. "Please, Lord," she murmured, her voice trembling but earnest. "Heal him. He's such a good man. He's been through so much, and the world needs more people like him." Her prayers were laced with emotion, and the sincerity in her voice touched Matin in ways he hadn't expected. Luna sat in the chair beside Matin's bed, her hands clasped tightly. She thought he was asleep, his breathing steady but shallow, so she let her guard down and spoke freely. "I know I'm just your uncle's caregiver," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But in these past months I've come to care about you, Matin, more than I should, maybe." Her cheeks flushed, even in the darkness, as she continued. "You're kind, strong, and so selfless. You see people in a way most don't. I wish you could see yourself the way I do." Matin's heart swelled at her words. He couldn't respond. Not yet. But the warmth of her confession seeped into his consciousness, giving him strength he didn't know he had. Her quiet presence during the nights, the way she adjusted his blankets or gently touched his hand, made him feel cared for in a way he hadn't felt since he was a child. The following morning, Matin's eyes fluttered open to find Luna dozing lightly in the chair beside him. Her head rested against the back, her hands folded in her lap. For the first time since falling ill, Matin felt a spark of energy, a desire to recover, not just for himself, but for the people who cared for him. "Luna," he said weakly, his voice hoarse. She startled awake, her eyes widening as she saw him looking at her. "Matin, you're awake." "Yes, I am," he murmured, managing a faint smile. "Thanks to you." Luna blinked back tears, leaning closer. "How do you feel?" "Better," he said, his gaze steady. "And grateful." Luna's cheeks flushed, and she busied herself adjusting his blankets. "You don't have to thank me. I was just doing my job." "No," Matin said, his voice stronger now. "It's more than that. I heard you, at night, what you said." Luna froze, her hand hovering over the blanket. "You heard that?" Matin nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Every word." Luna's face turned crimson, and she looked away. "I didn't mean for you to." "It's okay," Matin interrupted gently. "Your words gave me strength. You gave me strength." From that day on, Matin's recovery accelerated. Grace continued to watch over him during the day, sharing her stories and laughter, while Luna's nighttime presence became a source of comfort and quiet joy. Matin found himself looking forward to their moments together, even the small ones, a shared smile, a light joke, or the way she fussed over his pillow. He began to see Luna not just as a caregiver, but as someone who truly saw him for who he was. Her kindness, her patience, and her unwavering support broke through his walls, revealing a member. When Matin was released from the hospital, Luna continued to care for him at home. She made his meals, monitored his medication, and ensured he rested. Matin, ever observant, quickly noticed the little things about her, the way she hummed softly while working, the kindness in her eyes, and the way she always seemed to anticipate his needs. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Matin turned to Luna. "Thank you," he said, "for everything. I don't think I'd be here without you." Luna blushed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You'd do the same for anyone you cared about." Matin smiled. "You have a good heart, Luna. I think I've been too blind to see it." Luna shifted in her seat, her blush deepening at Matin's words. "You're too kind," she said softly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I mean it," Matin replied, leaning forward slightly. His dark brown eyes held hers, unwavering. "You've been there for Uncle Joe, for me, and you never ask for anything in return. That says a lot about who you are." Luna smiled shyly, her gaze dropping to the porch floor. "It's just how I was raised. My family always believed that helping others was the greatest purpose." "Well, it's not just help," Matin said. "It's who you are, and it's not something everyone can do so selflessly." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the golden light of the sunset washing over them. The chirping of crickets and the occasional rustling of leaves filled the air. Matin found himself wondering how he hadn't seen Luna for who she truly was before now. Her quiet strength and unwavering care were unlike anything he had experienced with anyone else. As the days turned into weeks, Matin's recovery progressed steadily. Luna remained at his side, her presence a constant source of comfort. She made sure he ate healthy meals, adjusted his medications as needed, and even coaxed him into taking short walks around the yard to rebuild his strength. During those walks, they talked about her childhood in a small town, her dreams of opening a holistic care center, and her love of gardening. Matin opened up too, sharing stories about his father, Uncle Joe's influence on his life, and his feelings of guilt over his failed relationship with Addie. "I guess I've always felt like I wasn't enough for her," Matin admitted one day as they strolled past the garden. "Like no matter what I did, it wasn't good enough." Luna stopped and turned to him, her expression gentle but firm. "You are enough, Matin. You just weren't the right person for her, and that's not your fault." Matin looked at her, the sincerity in her eyes stirring something deep within him. "You always know the right thing to say." Luna laughed softly. "I think you just needed to hear it." One evening, Matin was sitting at the kitchen table, watching Luna chop vegetables for dinner. The setting sun cast a warm glow over the room, and her face was illuminated in soft light. She hummed quietly as she worked, her movements efficient and calm. It was then that Matin realized just how much she had become a part of his life. Luna wasn't just helping him recover. She had brought a sense of peace and warmth into his home, a feeling he hadn't known he needed until now. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "I think you've spoiled me." Luna glanced up, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Spoiled you? How?" "You've made everything so easy," Matin said with a grin. "I don't know how I'll manage without you once I'm fully recovered." Luna chuckled, but there was a flicker of sadness in her eyes. "You'll be fine. You're stronger than you think." Matin's smile faded as he considered her words. "Do you plan on leaving when I'm better?" Luna hesitated, her hands pausing mid-chop. I had thought about it. I guess I figured my job would be done. It would be a conflict for me to be our caregiver, how things are with me confessing my feeling about you at the hospital, and I have already stayed too long, but I couldn't leave until you was better." Matin's chest tightened at the thought of not spending time with Luna every day. "I hope you know you're more than just a caregiver to me." Luna looked up, her eyes searching his face. "What do you mean?" Matin took a deep breath, his voice steady but soft. "I mean that I've come to care about you, Luna. More than I expected. More than I think I realized until now." Luna's hands trembled slightly as she set down the knife. She stepped closer to the table, her gaze fixed on Matin. "Are you sure? I mean, after everything you've been through, are you sure this isn't just gratitude?" Matin stood, his movements slow and deliberate. "I've been through a lot. Yes, but you've been the one constant, the one person who's made everything feel okay. That's not just gratitude." Luna's breath hitched, her heart pounding. "Matin, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll stay," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not just for now, for as long as it feels right." Tears welled in Luna's eyes, and she nodded. I'll stay, but I can't be your caregiver. Someone else will be assigned to Uncle Joe, and, well, you won't need a caregiver soon. Matin reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. Good, because I'm not ready to let you go. As soon as Matin was feeling much better, he took Luna out on a date. They enjoyed fine wine and great food and wonderful conversations. When they returned to Matin's house, hand in hand, they were greeted by the sound of raised voices. Grace and Uncle Joe were sitting in the living room, their faces animated as they argued over something. "What's going on?" Matin asked, stepping inside. Grace turned to him, her arms crossed. "I think you and Luna should have a June wedding." Uncle Joe snorted. "June's too hot. October's better. The leaves will be changing. It's romantic." Matin blinked, caught off guard by their conversation. Luna, standing beside him, covered her mouth to stifle a laugh. "It's our first date," she said, her voice tinged with nervous humor. Grace waved her hand dismissively. "First date or not, you two are perfect for each other. Why wait?" Uncle Joe nodded in agreement. "You know, I've got a list of baby names ready too. Just say the word." Luna's face turned a deep shade of red, while Matin groaned, burying his face in his hands. "Can we at least decide if we're having a second date before we talk about weddings and babies?" Grace smirked. "Make it quick, Matin. February's only 3 months away, and Valentine's Day is perfect for a wedding." Matin exchanged a glance with Luna, who was laughing softly despite her embarrassment. "What do you think?" he asked, his voice low and teasing. "Valentine's Day sound good to you?" Luna grinned, her eyes sparkling with humor. "I think it sounds great." Uncle Joe clapped his hands together. "Now that's settled, let's talk caterers." The following morning, Matin woke early with a decision weighing on his mind. The night before had been chaotic and filled with laughter, but it had also solidified something for him. He didn't want to waste any more time wondering. He wanted Luna in his life, not just for now, but forever. He made a few quick calls and went to pick up a simple yet elegant ring. When he walked into the house, Luna was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. She turned to him, her smile as warm as the sunlight streaming through the window. "Good morning," she said. "Morning," Matin replied, his heart racing. "Can we talk for a second?" Luna wiped her hands on a towel and stepped closer. "Of course." "What's up?" Matin took her hands in his expression serious but filled with warmth. "Luna, these past few months have been unexpected in the best way. You've shown me what it means to be cared for, to be truly seen, and I don't want to imagine my life without you in it." Her eyes widened as he reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring box, dropping to one knee. "Will you marry me?" Luna gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded, her voice breaking. "Yes, of course, yes." Matin slid the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling slightly. As he stood, Luna threw her arms around him, holding him tightly. The news spread quickly through the household, and Grace wasted no time springing into action. Within hours, she had booked the church and set up an appointment for premarital counseling. "You're not wasting any time, are you?" Matin asked, watching her scribble notes in her planner. "Time waits for no one," Grace replied firmly. "And February will be here before you know it." Uncle Joe grinned from his recliner. "At least now we can argue about the reception menu instead of the date." Matin and Luna exchanged a look, a mix of amusement and exasperation. But despite the whirlwind of activity around them, they couldn't stop smiling. The journey that had brought them together had been unexpected, but it had led to something beautiful. As the days passed and the wedding plans took shape, Matin and Luna focused on what truly mattered, the love that had grown between them, nurtured by moments of care, laughter, and faith. The church on Valentine's Day was a vision of warmth and love. Soft beams of sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the aisle as Luna walked toward Matin. Her dress was simple yet elegant, a flowy white gown with lace detailing that complemented her natural grace. Her hair was loosely pinned, with a single red rose tucked behind her ear. Matin stood at the altar, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked at Luna with a mixture of awe and joy, unable to believe that this moment was real. His dark suit and crimson tie, hand-picked by Grace and Uncle Joe, gave him a polished look that matched his radiant smile. The ceremony was simple but deeply emotional. The officiant spoke of commitment, faith, and the bonds of family, but it was Matin and Luna's vows that stole the day. "You've shown me what it means to love selflessly," Matin said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "With you, I've found a home, not just a place, but a feeling. I promise to cherish you, to laugh with you, and to stand by you, no matter what life brings." Luna's eyes brimmed with tears as she responded, her voice trembling but sincere. "You've been my anchor, my strength, and my joy. I never thought I'd find someone who saw me the way you do, and I promise to love you with all that I am, every day." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the room erupted into applause. Matin kissed Luna, the warmth of her lips and the cheers of their loved ones sealing the moment as one of the happiest of his life. The reception was held in the church hall, adorned with twinkling fairy lights and floral arrangements. Uncle Joe, ever the storyteller, took the microphone during dinner. His weathered face was flushed with emotion, and his voice, though rough from age, carried a deep sincerity. "Matin has always been more than a nephew to me," Joe began, pausing to wipe his eyes with a handkerchief. "He's been a son, a friend, and someone I could always count on. Watching him today, seeing the man he's become, fills my heart in ways I can't describe." He turned to Luna, his smile widening. "And you, Luna, you've brought something to his life that even I couldn't give him. A peace, a love that makes him shine brighter than ever. I'm proud to welcome you to this family, though I think you've been part of it all along." The room erupted into applause as Joe raised his glass. "To Matin and Luna, may your life together be full of love, laughter, and everything you've ever dreamed of." The years that followed were a testament to the love and loyalty Matin and Luna had built their life upon. They worked together to create a home filled with warmth and laughter, with Grace and Uncle Joe always nearby to lend a helping hand, or a playful argument. 2 years after their wedding, Luna gave birth to a baby boy. The delivery was long, but Luna's strength and Matin's unwavering presence carried them through. When the nurse handed Matin his son for the first time, he felt an overwhelming rush of love and gratitude. "Joe," he whispered, the name rolling off his tongue like a prayer. "We'll call him Joe." Luna, exhausted but beaming, nodded. "It's perfect." Uncle Joe, who had been pacing nervously in the waiting room, let out a laugh of pure joy when he heard the name. "Well, I'll be," he said, wiping his eyes. "The boy's got big shoes to fill, but I think he'll do just fine." Back at home, surrounded by family, Matin held baby Joe in his arms, his heart full. Grace sat beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder as she admired her grandson. Uncle Joe was in his favorite recliner, holding a tiny knit blanket he'd insisted on making himself. "This," Matin said, his voice thick with emotion, "this is everything I've ever wanted. Thank you for being here, for always being here." Grace kissed his cheek. "We wouldn't be anywhere else, sweetheart." Luna leaned against Matin, her head resting on his shoulder as she gazed at their son. "He's our little miracle." Matin nodded, his eyes never leaving the baby. "And he's going to grow up knowing what it means to love and be loved." As the evening settled and the house grew quiet, Matin and Luna sat together in the nursery, watching their son sleep. The glow of the moonlight through the window illuminated the room, casting a serene light on their faces. "I think we're going to be okay," Luna said, her voice soft. Matin kissed her forehead. "Better than okay? We're going to be great." In that moment, Matin knew that every struggle, every sacrifice, and every decision had led to this. A family rooted in love, resilience, and unwavering support. And as he looked at Luna, he knew their journey was just beginning. Hope you enjoyed listening to this beautiful love story by Green Tea Tales. Help our channel grow by liking and subscribing. Thank you.